Hello, everyone. I'm Abraham Leibson, and together with Jerry, he's also on the screen, co-chair the adult education programs of Kehilat Hanahar. And today we have a program. Well, first of all, I want to welcome you to and invite you on this trip into history to be curious together and be inquisitive and to hopefully answer some questions. I want to say that this inquiry into making art of Jewish history is really an overview. It is not being done by an expert, done by me, who just loves to read and research. But I'm not being critical or developing ideas for a particular artist or art styles. We will have that the next 3 weeks with David Stoller, who's also with us. And there are some very exciting programs coming up in the next 3 weeks, so be sure to join us. But this program today is called Making Art a Jewish History. And it's the idea of making art from biblical days through to Zionism today in Israel. And it's really a very, very kind of situation. And I say that because it's also kind of an unexpected history. Why? The biblical prohibition against graven images. It's been a complicated story. But there have been new and different versions of Jewishness over the years in different kinds of communities and different, some isolated, some not, and different programs emerged. So we will look at that. In the Torah itself, there are descriptions, and there's descriptions about exactly how Noah is to build his ark. We have descriptions of how to build the Ark of the Covenant. And we'll get into that. So I will also follow that with the evolution of a very famous school in Jerusalem, an art college. And we'll get into that, the history of that. It's pretty fascinating. So we'll start with a PowerPoint. We will interrupt that at some point to show a video, which will be a little spotty because I've needed to take a 50-minute video and bring it down to like 15 minutes so that we can pull it together without going beyond our ability to to sit here. We're only scheduled for so much time. If that video is of any interest to anyone, just email me and I'll send you the link and you can watch for yourself the entire video. So Jerry, I'm going to ask you if you would start with the PowerPoint.
Is there a video I missed? What are you doing?
I was just muting it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, finally.
Okay. So if you'll hit play, we'll do the first. Okay.
Okay, see that?
Okay, so I'm going to start with some of the first examples in the Torah, in the description of the Jews in the wilderness starting to form as a society and building the Ark of the Covenant, the place in which resides the 10 Commandments. And this is the text. Now I'll read this. Then the Lord said to Moses, See, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri and son of Ur of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding and knowledge, with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of crafts. Moreover, I have appointed Oliahab, son of Ahismach, of the tribe of Dan, to help him. Also, I have given ability to all skilled workers to make everything I have commanded you. So this is interesting in that it's the first time we see mention of designers and of craftsmen. The slide of, we'll go to the next slide. Here is an illustration that I found that shows supposedly the ark being built. It may be out of scale. It's a picture that I found actually on a Christian website. Kind of interesting. This resonates all over the world. When we think about arts, normally in Judaism, we really think more of literary arts, and rightly so. We're called the people of the book. But here is the beginnings of the people who make things, who draw things, who make beautiful objects, who make paintings and so on. Next slide, Jerry. So here is an image that's really from a movie set. It's the model used from Raiders of the Lost Ark. But they're pretty good about it. I mean, I looked up what it said in Torah. And this is the book of Exodus, details instructions of how the ark is to be constructed. It is to be 2.5 cubits in length, 1.5 breadth, and 1.5 in height. And that measures about 52 inches by 31 by 31. Then it is to be gilded entirely with gold and a crown or molding of gold to be put around it. 4 rings of gold are to be attached to its 4 corners, 2 on each side. And through these rings, staves of shittim wood overlaid with gold to carry the ark are to be inserted, and these are not to be removed. A golden lid, the kaporet, translated as mercy seat, I don't know what that means, or cover, which is ornamented with 2 golden cherubim, is to be placed above the ark. So the staves were kept in place because I guess they were always on the move. It's, why bother taking it out? Okay, next one, please. So here again is more of what is dictated in the Torah, and here are the vestments for Aaron and the priests, and the breastplate is very specifically identified. But there are other things that follow, and we have our own history of Torah decorations, and that all takes craft. We have in our traditions Kiddush cups and spice boxes, menorahs, of every kind and style, old and the new, are truly modern. They're sewn arm items used for birth and garments for death, and our museums, particularly the Jewish museum, are filled with them. The Jewish Museum in New York just has fabulous collections. The one in Philadelphia, and certainly in Israel, they have unrivaled collections of artistic elements. And I will show you some of these a little bit later. But then we have some exceptions. Here are some examples of the Torah art, and there are modern versions. These are older versions. Of course, there's the architectural designs of synagogues with bimas, and they vary according to which group, whether it's Ashkenazi or Sephardic, and there are other groups that we can talk about. But the exception that I'd like to point out that, and there are many of them, we'll go to the next slide, is the beginning of drawings and illuminations, which really seems to be a violation of the image making. But we'll talk about that. And I first discovered that probably 20 years ago, and I came across at the Metropolitan Museum a print of a Sarajevo Haggadah. It was one page with gilt, and it was so beautiful. I bought it and framed it. But here are a number of pages, and you can see that it illustrates, what's being talked about. Now, what we can learn about this is that the imagery that is not permissible was at some point interpreted during the rabbinic change, and we're, like many other things, new rulings had to be made. And of course, there's always competition. Competition because the Jews were living in Islamic lands and Christian lands where they had traditions of illumination. And so really under some reluctance, two-dimensional figurative art was permitted as long as it was not on sacred, on sacred books. But Haggadah was apparently like a useful text, and the other kinds of books, that's where it started to be used. And there are many examples of that. And we'll show you some more pages. And Jerry, if you'll go through the next one. Okay, this is an interesting little history about the Sarajevo Haggadah. It was made in Barcelona around 1350. It left Spain in 1492 after the expulsion of the Jews. It surfaced again in Italy in the 17th century. It got its name when it was sold in 1894 to the National Museum of Sarajevo by a man named Joseph Cohen. How and when the Haggadah made its way from Italy to Sarajevo in Bosnia is not known. Big mystery. Glad it's there. Next, some pages. Next. And you can see illuminations in the book. Not only Islam has illuminations, but it's primarily floral and decorative and graphic motifs, but not with people. And here, this was more more competitive with the Christian illuminations. This is, of course, all done by hand. Because Haggadot are not considered holy texts, but rather instructional materials, over time they've developed into beautiful artifacts of book art and other items like ketubot. And nowhere were such beautiful Haggadot made as in the Spanish city of Barcelona during the Middle Ages. And of all these Barcelona Haggadot, few can compare to the wonders and splendors of a book today known as the Sarajevo Haggadah. Next. The illuminations of the Sarajevo Haggadah show both Christian and Islamic influences. The pigments on the pages, you'd say, I guess, are made from lapis lazuli, azurite, malachite. The illuminations are decorated using gold, silver, and copper leaf. The name of the artist and scribes are unknown. Here's a photograph that I took. I'm not sure which book this is, but this was at the Israel Museum. You can see it has the decorations, but also illustrations. I'm not, I can't tell you the identity of that book, but there are many such examples. And here's another example, and we'll stop and talk a little bit about this first. I gave a talk a number of months ago, and actually that talk is on our website if anybody's interested in the story of Dura Europa. So it is a very unusual discovery made in, I think in the 1920s, 1930, in an archaeological find in Syria. And what was found was the remains of a city that had been attacked and destroyed. But because of some peculiarity of the history of the battle, that this one area had been buried and it was uncovered, and it was discovered to be a synagogue in a place in a city that was founded by Alexander, but it had survived for like 600 years. But it was a multicultural place where Greeks and Romans and people from all over the world, it was part of this, I guess must have been part of the Silk Road. But here you see illustrations, biblical illustrations on the wall of the synagogue. And it's very open. In fact, there is a church nearby which was hidden because at that point the Christians were in hiding. And what's unusual about it is that it's storytelling, and I want to make this analogous to the carvings done in 14th century Gothic cathedrals in Europe, where you had Bible stories primarily for people who were illiterate. But this was not the case with Jews, but the literacy was always very, very high. So this is done, I guess, to enhance, or I guess to please the eye or to beautify, but there's another reason to do this. This didn't seem to take into account this prohibition, and what's that about? It's an anomaly. So I came across a writing about a Spanish Jewish philosopher who died in 1440, a Prophet Duran. I don't know who this is, but he explains how art can inspire and stimulate holiness and learning. So here's some more plates, details of what you find in Dura Europas. And there's lots more about that. But then came a change. The forces of enlightenment really changed a lot in many ways. That reason was important, not just belief. We had people, for example, in the 12th century, Maimonides was given a hard time. And you don't necessarily expect that, but he was a rationalist. He had studied Aristotle, where that was not necessarily popular with other groups of Jews. But because of that, he gave us a gift. And so while he had his own interpretations, and he didn't, he organized things. He really led to a re-examination of the prohibitions. Next, Jerry. Okay, we're going to stop here for a moment to learn about the Bezalel Academy. But before we start that, I had found a couple more photographs which I didn't insert into the PowerPoint. I'm just simply going to hold it up, and I'm going to show you, for example, this picture of Hanahar. And you look at there are several of them there. They're very fanciful, and what's the reason? Well, it's because it's beautiful, and it is varied, and there are a gazillion versions. Even things like, I'm holding up another one, the traditional, Kiddush cup, the incense. Now, how many versions have you seen? A gazillion, but or the holder for the Havdalah. This takes craftsman art silversmiths. It takes all kinds of a desire to understand and appreciate form. This is a human impulse. And that's why I really believe it's an important part of our story. So we will do the video now, which will give us the name of this organization in Jerusalem is called Bezalel, named after the craftsman first mentioned in the Torah. And what's interesting about that is how it came about. There is during the early days of Zionism and Herzl, and he had a number of congresses in trying to drum up the idea of returning. Herzl was contacted by a Lithuanian sculptor by the name of Boris Schatz, who and the Zionists were really very secular. They just felt the strong need for Jews to get away from the oppression. They needed a place of their own, and it just to live, not just to pray. It was to have a life without having one's thumb on you. But Boris Schatz suggested to Herzl, says, this is a new society. You need to have an art school. And of course, Herzl said to him, great, you're in charge. So we'll start the video now. And it will be choppy, as I said earlier, because I isolated a few segments, but I'm asking Jerry to start and stop it according to the areas that I thought would give you the entire essence of that. And this is a video that celebrates the anniversary of the school, and it gives their history in much detail. And again, as I said earlier, if you're interested in this, getting this video link, I can send it to you.
You
So
see that now?
Yeah, if you start that, you get back to the beginning. Yes.
You have to start somewhere. I'll start with Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, a book by Herzl in 1896, where he proposes, and you can see the search, Versuch modernen Lösung der Judenfrage, the modern solution, a modern solution to the Jewish question. And in that book, he writes, the best way to avoid anti-Semitism in Europe is to create an independent Jewish state. And he also writes, we have no flag, we need one. If we desire to lead many men, we must raise a symbol above their heads. And here's his drawing of the flag. And you can see he's taken the Star of David, the Magen David. He takes that sign because it's on synagogues all over Europe. It's known as a Jewish sign, but it's not actually allied to any particular movement, especially religious movement as such. So it's a Parav sign, shall we say.
This is the area of Arvin.
And you can see 7 stars, and they represent the days of the week. Now, the first conference is going to be in 1897 in Basel. It's meant to be in Munich, but there's a problem with the rabbis in Munich because Herzl's idea is very much political Zionism, nothing to do from his perspective with religion. And of course, the rabbis are against this. So he ships it to Basel. And here you have a postcard from 1897. And where I've put the red arrow, that's the casino where the First Zionist Congress is going to take part. And almost 200 people are going to attend from 17 different countries. Some will be official delegates of the Jewish community in those countries. Others will just be people who are interested to attend. And you can see in the postcard, they picked up on Herzl's idea of the Magen David with the lion rampant, if you want the Aryeh Yehuda, the Lion of Judah, with the 7 stars. Now, here's a very bad photograph, and it's the best photograph I could find of the first conference in 1897. And the only figure you can really make out well is Max Nordau, who's the deputy to Herzl with his beard. And you can see the flag above them that they put on the wall, very much Herzl's idea for the flag. and you get a feeling for how the conference is. Remember that Herzl is a man of the theater, so he makes sure everybody dresses for the occasion. And in fact, when Max Nordau turned up that evening to the conference, or the first morning to the conference, Herzl sent him home to change into formal attire, because if you want to be taken seriously, you have to dress seriously. Now, here's a participant's card from the first conference. And what you can see on the left, the kotel, and you've got the religious Jews who are praying. And in fact, women there, so men and women together, no mechitza, no division between them and no argument. And then on the other side of the card, a Jewish peasant who's, from their perspective in Palestine, sowing the seeds. And this is taking place in August 1897. You can see the Star of David. And interestingly enough, very sexist, the cards were printed for Mr., but this was actually a ladies' card. There were a few women at that conference. And here's a postcard. They were very big on memorabilia. And here's a postcard. They were for people.
You want to stop there now, right?
Yep.
Okay. Move right along.
Now here's the second conference, and you can see number 2 there. And there's the Zionist flag. It's taking place in Basel again. You've got the kotel again with the religious Jews praying, and on the other side, you've got the Jewish peasant sewing. But if you look at the face of the peasant, very much Herzl's face. This is the idea. And you've got somebody else working in the rays of the sun. They've picked up from Yechezkel, from Ezekiel. I'm going to take the children of Israel from amongst the nations and bring them into their own land. Now, fascinating to me is because if I'd have drawn this, not that I have any talent for drawing, I would not have put in these extra 2 features. One is this architectural detail, which is very much Islamic or Ottoman, if you want, or Arab, very much to do with Muslim, to do with Islam, if you want. And this lady here, you look closely, she's clearly a nun. This is a Christian nun reading her Bible, because they're writing here, yes, the Jews, it's their place, and I'm going to take the Jews out of the other nations, and here they're represented. Now, when you go later on in the same year, Herzl is going to go to Israel, to Palestine at the time, to try and meet with his delegation, Kaiser Wilhelm. This is a setup that Herzl is working towards. He's a man of the theater, and he knows how important it is to have the photo opportunity. And here's a nice photograph of the emperor and his wife, actually in the Jaffa Road, where the Jewish community put up this arch, Augusta Victoria, because Kaiser Wilhelm II is actually the oldest grandchild of Queen Victoria.
I didn't realize that.
Really where I wanted to get to, the 5th Zionist conference in 1901, it's gone back to Basel, and the art has now stepped up a notch. This is by E.M. Lillian. The printer of this made a mistake. His name is Ephraim Moshe Lillian. We're going to see him again. And he designs this card, and it's which we know very well from the Shmona Esrei, and our eyes shall see your return to Zion in mercy. You've got on the left the religious Jew with thorns around him, the angel with the Magen David on the chest, pointing towards the Yeshua, the salvation. And here you've now got a religious Jew plowing into the sun, which is either rising or setting. And you've got these ears of corn, because this is going to be a very successful enterprise. Now, at the 5th Zionist conference, Max Nordau, and this is actually a Lillian engraving drawing on the first day, Max Nordau announces there's going to be a display of Jewish art in the room in the Congress building. This is a very big deal. Up until now, there's been a battle. This has all been about political Zionism. And now it's going to change, because they're going to bring in a bit of culture. So this is a very, very big deal. This is the first time in history that there's actually been a Jewish art exhibition, not an individual artist who may be Jewish, but some pieces of art that are defined as Jewish art. And there are going to be 48 pieces of art from 11 artists. And some of the organizers include, here's a very young Martin Buber, not a picture we're used to him, the Austrian Jewish philosopher who's going to end up in Jerusalem. Here's Lilien himself, Ephraim Moshe Lilien, HaKohen, and he's called now the first Zionist artist. We're going to see a lot of his work. And a name we know full well, Chaim Weizmann. And you can see they were all born pretty much at the same time. Young men here at the conference. And here's a picture of a particular faction, the Democratic faction. Here's Herzl in the middle. Here's Chaim Weizmann. Here's Lilien, the artist. Here's Martin Buber. And here's one of the pieces of art that was shown. Now, the actual art often wasn't shown. It was reproductions that was shown, photographs. And this is Bendemann's The Grieving Jews in Exile from Tehillim by the rivers of Babylon. We sat down, we wept when we remember Zion, very appropriate for this time of year. You can see the chains. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of art. Surprising that this was shown because Bendemann actually converted to Christianity. So it's surprising. I mean, can one call this Jewish art? And that's a whole nother debate and another issue, but obviously on a very, very Jewish topic. And here's another piece of very Jewish art. Today it's in Tel Aviv by Maritzi Gottlieb, who's called the Rembrandt of Poland. Jews praying in the synagogue, whoops, on Yom Kippur. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to change so quickly. This is a very complicated painting. This is Gottlieb himself, and these are members of his family, and this is him as a child. There's a lot one could say about this painting. In fact, the painting itself is huge. It's life-size. So it wasn't the painting that was shown, it was a photograph. And here's another piece that was shown at that exhibition, Joseph Israel's, and here from Shmuel Aleph, the idea that Shaul, King Saul, when he was depressed, feeling down, so here's King David, or David as a young boy, playing the harp to give him relief. And here's...
Okay.
Well, Herzl did make it once on a visit, but he's not going to make it to the nation that he believes is going to be formed in the future, which is what all the writing is all about. And in fact, the state of Israel, 100 years after the death of Herzl, is going to have this stamp. And of course, the famous comment, Im tirtzu ein zu Agadah, if you will it, it's no fairy tale. And here's I'm jumping the gun a bit with this, a Ze'ev Rabban with the same sort of motifs on it. We'll see Ze'ev Rabban in a sec. Now, but Schatz is going to write a postcard to this lady in Odessa in 1905. He has to go off to America. This is actually to do with Bulgaria. But he said, in a few months, I'll be traveling to Palestine to organize the school, which I'd long dreamt for. And here he is by his most famous sculpture, which has gone missing. It's called Matityahu, Matithais from the Chanukah story. And it becomes an iconic piece we're going to see again and again. 1st of March 1906, the Bezalel School of Art actually opens its doors in Jerusalem because Boris Schatz is going to come actually with Lillian. They come from Berlin. And in fact, the committee that establishes it is in Berlin. And the first students are enrolled. And the art instruction is focused on handicrafts, right, and fine arts. And here is the symbol that Lillian comes up with. And you can see this emblem designed by Lillian has the two cherubs, the kruvim, the same as on the Ark of the Covenant, should we say, in ancient times from Tanakh. And here you can see, right, there's the Ark of the Covenant, and he's got the luchot here as a symbol and the carrying handles. And it says Bezalel Yerushalayim. And here's actually a picture of Lillian, a photograph, which Lillian turns into a piece of art, an engraving. You can see what a fantastic draftsman. And he does an ex libris. This is a sticker that goes in a book for Boris Schatz, Dov Boris Schatz. And you can see Schatz as somebody closely aligned with the Ark of the Covenant. He's now carrying, as it were, forward. He's now the high priest in the Bet HaMikdash from his point of view. And interestingly enough, these stepways and such like, he was a Mason. So some of this is actually the iconography of the Masonic. He's a lodge member. Now, what's the aim and the purpose? And these are actually in the words of Boris Schatz. Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek b'Bezalel. He's taken that obviously from Pirkei Avot, that everybody in Israel has a share, chelek, right? Ba'olam haba, in the world to come. And he says, no, everyone's got to share in Bezalel. And it was founded with the object of developing art, pure as well as industrial, in the land of Israel, to teach Jewish children to draw, paint, make beautiful objects. And this is the sort of thing, it was strange to the Jews on the whole, because they never had the chance to do this in the shtetl. People, quite young. And at the time, Rav Kook, who's going to become the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi, in 1908, he's going to write a famous letter to the founders of Bezalel. Now, Rav Kook is very much from the religious side, but he's going to draw together. Rav Kook is one of these amazing individuals who can bring together all sides of the equation. And he's got the heart of a poet. And you can read in his letter, he says, one of the definitive signs of rebirth is the praiseworthy work that's about to emerge from your admirable group. He doesn't call them a group of sinners. He says they're admirable, the rebirth of Hebrew art and beauty in the land of Israel. This vision is heartwarming.
My father's friend.
I'm showing you, you could talk for an hour on each slide with what's going on. There's going to be an exhibition in London, Here's Lady Swathling. This is in the Baker Street. This is taking place in 1912, and it's for Bezalel and also Evelina de Rothschild. There's still the school in Jerusalem, the Evelina de Rothschild, who died young. And just to show you that, and again, I have to be careful because time is ticking. In this booklet, which goes with the exhibition, is this poem. There was a bazaar called Bezalel for donations, the Jews lehit palel, to pray. When Heshat saw the figure, the amount of money, he grinned like I'll say shviga from Yiddish, but it's actually not. It's an N-word that nobody can use today. And he then hurried home to say Hallel, right, to give blessings. And this is the sort of poem which today would be completely off limits. Is from Palestine, if you want, 1911, and it's set up by Boris Schatz and Murray Rosenberg, who's actually the honorary secretary of the English Zionist Federation, taking it in 1911. Here's the door, the entrance to the Bezalel, and these tourists, including Murray Rosenberg's wife, Hilda, are going to come along. Here they are in their Mercedes-Benz, and they're going to be welcomed by the guard. And now the next man out the door is going to be Boris Schatz with his helmet, welcoming them, and his number 2 at the school, and hello to Mrs. Hilda Rosenberg, come in. This is going to be used as a promo. And in they go to the Bezalel School of Art. Amazing that we actually have this film and it's available to us to see. And we're going to take a quick tour, very, very short tour round. And here's, we're in the workshops with the girls working, predominantly girls working at the looms. And they're being shown round. We'll see some drawing classes as well on the left. It's all very busy. Now, what's the purpose of this? Well, you always, whenever you go and see a site, even until today, you're always led out. We call it in England, exit via the gift shop. You're always going to be led out through the gift shop. And that's exactly what's going to happen at Bezalel. And you're going to buy your stuff to remember your visit and take home with you. And that's how they raise the funds to keep themselves going, right? The same as a museum today, if you want. In fact, he's going to establish a museum in the Bezalel School of Art. And here's Chad Gadya, right? The painting with him. He's going to establish a museum, and it's going to become the National Museum of Israel. The Israel Museum today directly comes from the Bezalel School of Art. And here's Glickenstein's statue, and they've taken a Jerusalemite to show the old, if you want, religious. Now here's Montefiore's carriage, which actually never traveled. Moses Montefiore came to Israel in 1827. He made a few trips. He never actually traveled in this carriage on the road to Jerusalem. But Boris Schatz, brought this over. And there's Mrs. Rosenberg having a look. And here's Boris Schatz with his young students around him. And again, these photographs are used very much to promote. Wouldn't you want to give money and support these young people we're educating? And here's a fun day, shall we say, at Bezalel in Israel. They call it a Yom Kef, where you've got here the first photographer, Ben Dov. And again, amazing, this man, because of this film, actually asked to get a cine film so he can start taking photography, and there's a lot of it. You see something, you don't see this very much in the Jewish world, being fit. Here's the gym teacher showing this is the new Jew, the fit Jew, right? Keep your what is it, a healthy body and a healthy mind, right? And we'll see here Boris Schatz and his number 2 in their pith helmets, and I mean, it's very much showmanship. Here's Boris Schatz with your Jerusalemite. And again, you can see the fun they're all having. This is a major institution in Jerusalem. The religious come and visit, they interact. And from this, they're giving an identity, an artistic identity. And much of the art that we sort of take for granted today, like Migdal David. And of course, at the end of the trip, via gift shop, here are the people exiting with the stuff they bought at the gift shop. And
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
I had occasion about 10 years ago to attend a lecture. I think it was in Princeton. It was given by an Israeli scholar on Jewish art. And it came to mind recently when I was preparing for this. And there was a question from the audience about how is it possible that the art could be reconciled with the biblical prohibition? And this answer really stunned me. The lecturer said that it was Hasidim that really put a stop to that, and that is only 300 years. So it's saying it was alive and well before, and it is alive and well now. But in the Hasidic world, according to the scholar, was the one that who tried to reinforce that. I was also surprised in this video to see sculptures, because it's the sculpture in particular that is seen as an idol, but that seems to be perfectly acceptable. We're going to go on to see some more slides on the PowerPoint. And I wanted to mention that Sharon and I visited Israel for a month in 2013, and one of the things one of the places I wanted to visit was Bezalel, and I went there. I happened to be an industrial design consultant and retired for years, but I visited their industrial design department and introduced myself to their department chair just to see what was going on and be able to compare that to the experience that I've had in that kind of school. It was a really remarkable experience. So let's get started on the slides again. Jerry, if you'll resume that. No, it's further up. No, go further back, Jerry. It's I'll tell you what's. I think I can tell you what slide it is. Just a minute. Start with slide 20. Okay. These are actually a couple of slides that after our visit to Israel, I made a little bit of a slideshow about our experience. I plucked out some of those, and this was from that trip. So go on to the next one. Here we are at the Bezalel Academy. Next. The front of the campus. Next. It's in Mount Scopius, which is really a suburb of Israel, of Jerusalem. It had been in Jerusalem proper until they built the new campus. Next. Student work. We'll just go through some of those things that I was able to photograph while at the school. Next. Painting. Next. Interesting, very modern, student work using wire, and I don't know what you call it, but it's a form of sculpture. Enjoyed seeing that. Next. Yes, a shop for building furniture designs. Next. I was surprised that they had a film arts department. And this was long ago. I mean, we're talking about 9 years. A lot has happened in the video world, but you can see here, sketches for planned animations, I suppose. I don't know, but it was nice to see those things on the walls. Next. Apparently some kind of sculptural project going on. Next. And then a little digression, we visited museums, and the Israel Museum is world class. It is stunningly beautiful. It has so many things. It has objects pertaining to history, religion, costume, ritual items, mezuzot, and chalitiyot, and everything you could imagine, and even more so. It's really a premier institution. Next. And just a couple more slides. This is the picture on the left is like either an apple core, a large piece of modern sculpture. Yet there is the old objects. I forget what those objects are, but just the combination and the span. I thought it was interesting to see all that in one institution. Next. So we were walking around Tel Aviv, and we stumbled across artist shops, and this is a sculpture gallery, and it was kind of a stunning display. I had to take a picture, and there's my share and enjoy it. And this is what you see in Tel Aviv. Next. I thought I would research, and I Googled graduates of the school, and I have just some brief slides of a number of them. Some of them you may know, others maybe not. And I thought this was some beautiful examples of painters, Nahum Gutman. And it just so happens that we were able to see his studio also separately while we were in Tel Aviv. Next. Yeah, this is the Gutman studio that was open for tourists, and we enjoyed seeing that. You can see like he was just there this morning. Next. Look at the wonderful, mother and child painting on the left, and it's ready to sit down and work. Interesting chair too. Next. Rabbi Diana has a piece of artwork of Yaakov Agam. At least she did for a while in her office, and Agam is very much a modernist who has done a lot of work on like three-dimensional triangulated canvas, where you've got, when you look at it from the left, you see one thing, you look at it from the right, you see another view, and together it's an interesting collage. And here he is as a younger man, very modern. Next slide. He did a water fountain that I was unaware of in Tel Aviv. I didn't see it in person, but I found this image and said, isn't that wonderful? Next. Here he is as an older person. I don't know whether he's still alive. I assume he is. I haven't heard otherwise. But this is a building that he decorated. His artwork is part of the architecture. That's pretty advanced, I'd say. It's very much an aesthetic enterprise. Next. This, I believe, is also the same person doing sculpture. Hanahar, yeah, is that modern or what? Just the whole is like Mondrian's lines, and yet you know where the shamus is on the left, and it's really a very unexpected kind of design. It's beautiful. Next. And now we're into a whole area that really to my topic, my professional topic. Ronald Rod was world known as an industrial designer, and here he is designing a very practical thing, a chair. It's so fluid. It's like red taffy. It's so interesting, so creative. Next. Next slide, Jerry, please. A couch. It's a flourish of form. I'd like to try to sit in it and see, judge it from that standpoint, but visually it's stunning. Next. How would you describe that? It's like
Uncomfortable.
pen strokes. It's beautiful. It's like double ears, but yet it looks like you could really sit in it and be comfortable. But by itself, it's a piece of sculpture. I mean, nothing worse than a chair that's sculptural that you can't sit in. But this one I think probably works, but I haven't tried it. Next. Here we have a painter, Ruth Schloss. I'm not familiar with her, but I really loved seeing the wonderful wash sense of the paint, particularly the painting on the right. But you see her, you see some examples of her work. Next. Judy Gerstein. It looks like it's squeezed right out of the tube, but what a fresh idea. There's apparently a whole body of work. I remember hearing his name, but I really didn't know his work, but there it is, another graduate of Bezalel. Next. Okay, and then now I'm shifting to something that's very current. This is an article from the New York Times that I came across only about 2 weeks ago. Some of you may have seen it in the paper. This artist, Beverly Barkat, has done this piece of sculpture, and you'll see more with further slides of where it goes, but how she does it. And it's really a statement on where she has used trash to make sculpture. And her personal story is interesting, and you'll see it in a slide coming up. Next. So here she is in the process of building the sculpture, which is called Earth Poetica. It's a huge globe, which is going to be, I don't know whether it's there now or it will be at Ground Zero in Manhattan. Really world-class artwork going on. And these are all composed of resins that embed trash, which she has found and found beauty in it. Next. Okay, this is actually text that I plucked out of the article itself. When the Jerusalem artist Beverly Barkat began to create an artwork with a lobby of a building in the New World Trade Center complex overlooking Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, she aimed to come up with something architecturally site-specific and impactful, large enough to connect the space, but not so enormous as to disconnect from the observer. Barkat had a stark message to convey. Years earlier, she said she had been struck by the image of children scavenging on a once beautiful beach awash in plastic. It stayed with me, she said. We're suffocating with the earth. born in Johannesburg to parents who were ceramicists, who came to Jerusalem in 1976 when this woman was the age of 10, when her family took up a year-long appointment at the Bezalel's Academy of Fine Arts and Design. When the year was up, they decided to stay in Israel. Now again, it circles back to Bezalel. Next. Another view. Next shot. Yeah, from the inside. Next. While she's working on it. This is all out of the New York Times. Next. Okay, so now we're doing an about face. We're leaving. Oh, no, go back, Jerry. I just want to talk a little bit about. Go to the previous slide. It seems like the forces that bring people to make art really is embedded in humankind. It's hard to avoid. And I wanted to point out that regardless of prohibitions or whether they're small or temporary, it's hard to repress them. So I found some interesting images back to Brooklyn, and this is in the Hasidic community. So we'll go to the next one now. This is like a story from Stissel. Meet the husband and wife behind Williamsburg's first Hasidic gallery. Isn't that fascinating? I found a midrash that said that not only are mitzvot enhanced by an aesthetic dimension, but so is the Jew who observes it. This is important. Next. This is in which community? It's in Brooklyn, I think. That hasn't been whitewashed over. I mean, this is apparently in their community, and it's an image which they permit. Next. In Crown Heights, and you can see the boom of the person who was painting this building. That's striking to me that it would happen. Now, we'll start a discussion, and I'll ask you some questions, but I wanted to mention before we do that I came across just the other week in poking around that there is a course available called Examining Art, a Window into the Spirit of Israel. And it's online, and it's from the Florence Melton School of Adult Education at Hebrew University. It talks about how this course is a lens to contemporary artist expression, how it represents current Israeli culture. And it takes a deep dive in understanding the origins of what makes the fascinating scene that is today's art world in Israel. So with that too, I just poked around and found what's happening now in Jerusalem. So I thought I would just pose a few questions or ask you to speak up. I want to ask about, what do you see in this Jewish evolution in the world of art? Or what surprises you, or what doesn't surprise you? What questions do you have? What pleases you? And so, Jerry, if you will conclude that, I'd like to invite you to say, what was a surprise? What was pleasing? Just unmute yourself and.
wonderful examples of so many different kinds of arts and craftsmanship. And, we're just reading the part now in the Torah, right, of creating the Mishkan. And so we've been talking a lot about those cherubim, and that was
The cherubim, yes.
Yeah, just a nice
Yeah,
picture again, but it wasn't just, cherubim, but it was cherubim, and then all underneath that, the artistry of gold. And so all
Yeah.
different kinds of
yeah.
craftspersons doing that kind of work, very different kinds of art involved. It was beautiful to see.
Well, how do you feel about the idea that the art will not be repressed? That we have this kind of driving inner force to whether it's artistic in words or artistic. I mean, the Psalms are poetry, and that to me that's art. It's not just religious stuff. It is magical words just to listen to. Yes, Judy. Unmute yourself.
So I kind of always try to think within the context of its time. And I think we've had art. There were Jewish German artists. We've seen the exhibits as through your Bagel U, where art was prohibited, and Hitler declared this heresy and the whole counter convention showing the art. So when I think of Jews in political situations, I think of art as being, because it's visual, it's right there for you to be subject to the anti-Semitism for. When you write something and it's within prose and within your prayer books or within something that it can be more coveted. When you have music and you sing it within your congregation, to me, which is incredible art, we have magnificent music that's evolving. We have literary pieces that are evolving. But I think the hardest part about art is that it's easy to be seen, not that it was so prohibited by the Hasidic movement. So I brought a piece down, and this artist, I think he is Hasidic. His name is Muchnick, and he does all these things that are scenes from the Torah. He's from Brooklyn. He was doing these back, I'm pretty sure, in the when he started in the late 20th century, but he's been doing it, and I'm sure you see it on Jewish calendars all over, but a lot of them are depictions of biblical scenes and many interpretations of them. And I would say the first one down in Brooklyn, it must have been 1980. You could see a lot of this all over, and it was being purchased. He was doing hundreds of them, and they were being sold. So I'm wondering if it's the political stage, not just the Hasidic view, that prevented so much viewing and allows public as well as an artist to sell a piece of art.
Well,
That's a very interesting point. David, you're muted.
I thought it was a great presentation, and it is interesting how art was married to the rise of the state of Israel as, part of this modern movement that was inevitable. And I would, point out that at that same time, there were Jewish artists, like in the Soviet Union. You had Chagall and Lisovitsky and these constructivists that were absolutely modern and were so excited by the revolution, this brief moment of time in the Soviet Union where they were free to express themselves through art. And you can also see, and I'll be talking about this a little bit in the next few weeks, that it didn't take Jews very long to explode into modern art, particularly when they came to America, but in Europe as well. This, of course, was at the rise of Picasso and Leger and Gris. And in America, Jews became, the leaders, among the leaders of what we now view as modern art. So you see this move from the traditional religious to all of a sudden this secular embrace of the modern that, accompanied the founding of the state of Israel.
Very good.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, certainly there were Jews in many places in Europe who, if they had the skills and if they disconnected from the shtetl life, who were then beyond the pale. And the art academies of Russia had lots of Jews. And there they got very fine training. And as you say, there's some wonderful examples of that. So if there are no other questions, we just have a few minutes left if there are any more. Anyone else? Yes, Judy.
I have a question for you, Abraham. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and showing us how it was linked to the beginning of Israel. I'm wondering what you think Herzl felt in his decision to make art the choice of the arts to be thought of tying it to Israel, not necessarily music or prose, but choosing art.
Well, I don't know that he chose it himself. He was offered this opportunity by somebody who by Boris Schatz, the idea, and he had somebody there. He said, "Yes, you do it." So it was Herzl's feeling that this is a new society that needs to have all aspects of a creative, fully functioning society. I mean, why did he have in those pictures from the congresses of farmers? Well, Jews were prohibited from owning land or for doing any kind of agrarian work. I mean, so much so that they really didn't know it, and for them to be able to return to the earth to do such a basic thing as creating food is a remarkable change in itself, and that was part of what Herzl was thinking of.
Thank you. So he's actually using as many avenues as possible to have
Yes.
people join his movement.
Yes.
And so he must have a strong feeling that there is a lot of repression in the world of art,
Yes.
and that these people will be drawn to Israel where they can express their art.
Well, it's an interesting point that the Israelis have certainly picked up a great deal on art, but that has also created the tensions that exist now, and it actually existed from the very beginning between the religious community and the secular community. I mean, the survival of Israel is now technically very advanced, and they're very strong in digital, concepts and so on. Really relies on their willingness to study, to have mastery in science. I mean, look at what they're doing in handling the COVID situation. They're really leaders in testing ideas. They're now doing fourth shots for people who are compromised. There's and I think it's part of the heritage of learning. It is part of, these are people who don't sit idly by, that they say, we will move forward, we will understand, we will discern, we'll separate the wheat from the chaff, we'll get to the bottom of things. And that shows itself in many different ways. Okay. With that, I want to wish you all a nice afternoon and thank you for coming. And
My mother.
good.
Thank
I'm
you
glad
so
you
much,
enjoyed it.
Abraham. This was a
Thank you.
wonderful
Thank you,
discussion.
Abraham.
And I look forward to your presentations following up on this, David.
Yeah.
Great. Look
Thanks,
forward to it.
Miriam.
Shavuot Tov, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. It's
Thank
a little
you.
chilly, but maybe a walk.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.